Last year, I made this exact video trying to predict 5 players who I think will decline heading into this NHL season, and I think I did pretty well in that video. I had David Perron, William Karlsson, Thomas Vanek, Anders Lee, and Dustin Brown. All of those players had lesser point totals this year than they did in the 2017-18 season, and a lot of you guys, if you were subscribed then, really seemed to like that video, so I wanted to do that and try to predict 5 players who I think will decline next season. And I'm not trying to be negative in this video, I'm just trying to give some insight and some random predictions heading into next season. And if you guys play fantasy hockey, maybe you can use this video as like a list of 5 players that you should shy away from next season, in fantasy hockey. So with that being said, let's jump right into the video. Starting off the video with Mark Giordano from the Calgary Flames, and obviously he had an amazing season, a Norris Trophy caliber season. I know he's probably going to get a lot of votes, and he definitely deserves them because he was amazing. He was shut down, he was producing on the offensive end as well, and it was just all around a career year for Mark Giordano. And at the age of 35, I'm not sure a lot of people saw that coming, and I don't really think he's going to be able to replicate that next season. And I'm not saying he's going to fall off and be a bad player by any means, but I just think he's probably going to come down to earth a little bit more next season. And I also don't really think he's going to have to play as big as a role next year as he did this season, with guys like Noah Hannafin being a year older. Rasmus Andersson is probably going to be playing a full-time role in the top 4. I just don't think there's going to be as much pressure on Mark Giordano to really carry the defensive load next year, and I think that really is going to bode well for this Calgary Flames team. Giordano, he's a 35-year-old defenseman, has played in 833 career games, has 129 goals, 323 assists for 452 points, and then this year, 78 games played, 17 goals, and 57 assists for 74 points. And Mark Giordano was never really known as the greatest offensive defenseman, but he put up an amazing point total, just all around an amazing year for the captain of the Calgary Flames, and he really is a big reason as to why this Calgary Flames team was so dominant all season. And I definitely think the team is still going to be very good next year. And like I said, I'm not saying Mark Giordano is going to fall off and be a bad player. I just think he'll probably get down there back to around 45 to 50 points and not having so much pressure on him as a 35, 36-year-old next season. But I do think he will decline from the Norris Trophy caliber season that he had this year. Next up, we have captain of the Carolina Hurricanes, Justin Williams, and I do think he's going to drop down a little bit in terms of his point production. I mean, the guy's 37 years old, but he has just been an Iron Man over his entire NHL career. The past 5 years, he's consistently been playing 80 to 82 games, and that is very impressive for a guy who is 37 years old, and especially with the NHL moving so much towards, being a young player's game. But Justin Williams, an Iron Man, and definitely still I think will be impactful next season, but probably not up there around 50 points. He's a 37-year-old winger, 1,244 career games, 312 goals, and 474 assists for 786 points. And then this past season with the Hurricanes, 82 games played, which like I said, that is very impressive for a guy of his age, 23 goals and 30 assists for 53 points, was named the captain of this Carolina team and played a massive role in what they were able to accomplish this season, making it to the conference finals. But kind of the same situation like I said with Mark Giordano. I don't think Justin Williams is going to be playing as big as a role next year as he did throughout the majority of this season, and especially in the playoffs. I don't see him being, a top 6 forward potentially anymore, especially with guys like Martin Necas, who I think will come in and, be a top 6 forward. But Justin Williams most likely going to be the captain of this team, probably until he does decide to hang it up. But you never know, anything can happen. I honestly could see Justin Williams playing in the NHL till he's around 40 to 42 years old. It just seems like he's that type of guy that just never wants to retire, always wants to be, in that environment. And he is an amazing leader. Like I said, he was a huge part in why this team was able to make it to the conference finals. I think he had a huge impact in a good way on a lot of the young players on this team, and Carolina definitely made, in my opinion, the right decision naming him captain. And hopefully next season he can keep this up, but I could see him dropping back down to around maybe 35 to 40 points while still being a pretty impactful guy and an amazing leader for this Carolina team. Next up, we have Evgenii Dadonov from the Florida Panthers, and this is one that a lot of people might disagree with, but in my opinion, he kind of overachieved in his first 2 seasons returning to the NHL. He was drafted by the Florida Panthers back in the 2007 NHL draft, only tried 3 seasons in the NHL, never played a full year, and then obviously was playing in the KHL until the 2017-18 season, where he did return to the Florida Panthers, had 65 points in his first year back, looking like it was a fantastic pickup for this Florida team. And then this year he was able to build on that as a 30-year-old, played in all 82 games, 28 goals and 42 assists for 70 points, and he was a big part of their offense. He's an amazing player on the power play, but in my opinion, I kind of feel like he overachieved a little bit, and like I said with a lot of the other players in this video, I feel like his role is going to be diminished just a little bit next season, especially if guys like Owen Tippett, and then maybe a guy like Heponiemi, and then also Henrik Borgstrom, the young players that they have there are ready to step in and, play power play roles, play top 6 roles and stuff like that. And so I think there's going to be a lot of internal competition with the Florida Panthers next season, especially in terms of, power play time, who's in the top 6 and who's not. But definitely Evgenii Dadonov has the potential to prove me wrong here. I could honestly see him being up there around 70 points once again, but this is kind of just one of the random prediction ones and not really putting too much thought into it. I just feel like he overachieved a little bit, and like I said with a lot of the other players as well, I'm not saying he's going to be bad next season. I could just see him dropping down to maybe around 60 to 55 points, still being a important part of this Florida Panthers offense, but definitely has been great for them since returning to the NHL. But in my opinion, I think his point totals are going to drop just a little bit next season. The next player we're going to take a look at is Zach Parise from the Minnesota Wild, and I was very impressed by the season that Zach Parise had with the Wild. A lot of people thought, his career was over. He was going to be a bottom 6 guy, potentially bounce around the league, people trying to unload his contract and stuff like that. But he honestly was the best offensive player for this Minnesota Wild team this year, and a lot of people didn't expect that heading into the year. As a 34-year-old who was just never able to stay healthy over the past couple of years, was never able to get back to the player that he was, with the New Jersey Devils when he was one of the top forwards in the entire NHL. And heading into this season, I had Zach Parise in a video talking about how he could be an X factor for this Minnesota Wild team and really put them over the edge if he does, get back to the player, not really get back to the player that he was in New Jersey, because that's a little absurd to ask for a guy who's 34, but just get back to being a really productive offensive player that we know he's still capable of being. And he did get back to that, but sadly it wasn't really an X factor for this team because they were still not able to make the playoffs. I think they're probably trending in a little bit of a rebuilding direction, but definitely when you have a guy like on a contract like Zach Parise has, you definitely want at least some offensive production from him, and he has been giving them that, especially over this past season, where in 74 games he had 28 goals and 33 assists for 61 points. It's nice to see him playing 74 games because, like I said, it just seemed like he could never stay healthy. Has played in 946 games over his career. Hopefully he can hit 1,000 next season. 361 goals, 385 assists for 746 points. And like I said, he's on a pretty bad contract, but hopefully he can still continue to give them some decent offensive production and still be a pretty decent leader, for a lot of the young guys on this team as well. But honestly, next season I could see him dropping back down there to around 40 to maybe 50 points, and hopefully he can stay healthy. But with Zach Parise, that is definitely something you can't rely on, so I would probably stay away from him, in fantasy hockey if it were me. But I honestly do think he's going to decline a little bit in terms of point totals next season. And now finishing off the video with maybe a little bit of a bolder one, the youngest player I'm going to talk about, and that is Erik Gustafsson from the Chicago Blackhawks, 27-year-old defenseman. In my opinion, he did overachieve in a big way this season. I mean, nobody in the world probably predicted this guy to be a 60-point defenseman, kind of just out of nowhere. I mean, he's only played in 155 career games, has 22 goals and 68 assists for 90 points, the majority of those points and goals coming in this season. 79 games played for the Hawks this year, 17 goals and 43 assists for 60 points. And Chicago was a very good offense this season, and that is relatively what kept them in the playoff race. The struggle that they had was keeping the puck out of their net. They don't really have many shutdown defensemen or any consistency in goal, and in my opinion, I think Erik Gustafsson should really not focus so much on putting the puck in the net and getting those numbers. Obviously, if he can, he's going to, but I think he definitely should focus this summer on transitioning more into a two-way defenseman to really establish himself as maybe the future #1 guy for this team. Obviously, they have Adam Boqvist and Henri Jokiharju, but Erik Gustafsson, already 27 years old, is probably going to be a pretty significant piece for this D-core moving forward, especially with guys like Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook getting up there in age, but I honestly just can't see him being a 60-point defenseman again, and there really isn't much, into that. I'm not really looking too much into it. I just think he overachieves. 60 points is a lot, especially for a defenseman, and a defenseman like Erik Gustafsson. I mean, every time I look and I'm like, Erik Gustafsson had 60 points, it just blows me away. An amazing season for him. I was very impressed by it, and I'm not saying he's going to drop off. I still think he's going to be a very good defenseman for them. I just think he'll probably be down there around 40 to 45, maybe 50 points next season. So that is going to wrap up today's video. I really hope you guys did enjoy, and like I said at the start, I'm not trying to be hateful. I don't hate on any of these guys. I'm not trying to be negative. I just don't think they're really going to have as big as an impact next year as they did this past season. And let me know down in the comment section any players that you think are going to decline next year. And with that being said, I hope you guys all enjoyed today's video. If you did, please make sure to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel for daily NHL content, and I will see you guys all in the next video.